Hey everyone, have you heard about the new sequel to Total Recall? It's called Can't Recall. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi everyone, it's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Welcome back from your holiday weekend. It's Tuesday. It's not Monday, it's Tuesday. But get ready for work. I'm personally excited. I'm out of here tomorrow, heading out to Italy for about 10 days with family. Looking forward to it. It's interesting as an American traveling the world these days. So I'll report when I get back. But let's jump into what we have going on here today. It's a bit of a security heavy day. And it's good because we have some really security heavy people. I don't mean they're heavy. I mean they're big into security. Let me introduce you to our group for today. First of all, from the Great White North, we'll go north to south perhaps. From the Great White North, he's a resident security expert, friend Chris Blask. Hey Chris, how are you?
I am good, and I just want to put a term in your ear to think about as we go forward: narrative resilience.
Narrative resilience.
Yeah, we will over the coming weeks and months. I think it'll be a fascinating topic.
Okay, you heard it here first from Chris Blask. Again, I'm not sure who's further north here. I'm going to go with Mike Vizard in upstate New York. Well, it's not really upstate, but
It is a grand total of 20 minutes north of New York City. So it just depends on where your definition of upstate is. But
on Long Island, anything north of the Bronx is upstate.
For us locals, it's generally anything north of New Paltz. But what do we know?
What do you know? All right, Mike, welcome home. Next, we'll go to Jack Poller. Jack, I'm forgetting where exactly you're based.
Well, I am in the north of the South. I am in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Right. Now I remember, yes.
Right. We got 3 square miles of Northerners buried deep in Yankee, in Southern Territory here.
Yep, around Cary. They called it, so down here in Florida, we call that the halfback, right? It's for people who came all the way down here and then only moved halfway back. And it's halfback land. Well, continuing south, though, to the mountains of New Mexico, she's the CEO of Deploy Hub and open source extraordinaire expert, our friend Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing great, and I hope you have a fabulous trip in Italy. It sounds like a wonderful thing to do right now, and it's a well-deserved vacation, I'm sure.
Yes, it is. Yes, I'm taking, it's 10 of us going. It's going to be fun.
What makes you think you're going to be let back in? That was a pretty optimistic statement.
I've told Bonnie that do not be surprised if at some point on one of our trips I'm detained. Because they could look up my social media or they'll look at something and say, I'm not a huge fan of this administration.
So we'll just have to call it Techstrong Gang International after that.
Yeah.
We got your back. Back, Alan.
For posterity, look at my hands right now. I have no tattoos on my fingers, okay?
Oh, they could fix that.
Right. Oh, they will. But in case they try to pull that, I want a record. Let's move along here and jump into today's topics. So, Mike, you want to take this one? It looks like Signal is telling Microsoft no can do.
Yeah, basically, the controversy surrounding this recall feature that Microsoft is putting into Windows 11 continues. Now, Signal is saying that they're going to block that feature for recall, which is designed to capture automatic screenshots and everything on your screen, and we'll make that available somehow or other on that platform, but maybe in the cloud. Who knows where all that data winds up? And Signal, of course, is all about, privacy and not sharing data. So, Chris, are we going to see more of this? Will other folks follow suit, do you think? And is data privacy actually becoming a real thing now?
Well, as you know, I try to find a positive path out of these sort of things. There's teaching lessons and so forth, and not use terms too much like dumbass. But I'm not sure. Can I use dumbass on the show? I mean, no. It's an indication of the immaturity of corporate governance in certain ways, right, regarding privacy and so forth. I mean, this is tone deaf, is the right. I mean, you said it. Literally everyone on Earth now. I mean, Signal has been this sort of geeky app, for years and years and years, but suddenly literally everyone knows. So someone at Microsoft, made a decision that indicates that the decision-making structure of Microsoft on this issue is not mature. So maybe it's a forcing function to get better process in place, but it has us talking about it. So maybe that's the upside.
Jack, is this just another example of the well-intentioned gone wrong? That road paved to hell?
Yeah, I think so, sort of, but it's also an indication where Microsoft forgot all about security, right? The very first, shocker, they forgot about security. The first release of Recall, when it was first announced, had no concept of security whatsoever. They went back and rethought it and said, okay, well, we'll tie it to your Windows Hello login. And so you can't access that, but that ignores a whole bunch of other concerns. Like, do you want an AI engine to be indexing your private data to begin with? And so I look at it and I say, many years ago, I called Java the virus description language. And I think we can call Recall is remember everything, secure nothing. Right. It's really just a huge privacy issue. And, we think about it on a personal level, but if you think about it in the enterprise, to have something that screenshots an executive's PC every 3 seconds on what they're doing is just a huge opportunity for data leak, data exposure. And I just can't see how this is going to be successful in the long run.
I think it's a Darwinian sort of thing. And again, that's what always gives me hope on this stuff because, this is so blindingly fumble fingered, for a big corporation. To be clear, Microsoft actually does a lot of good security, a lot of good folks there. We all, many of us here remember the days when they really did. It's just
Trustworthy Computing Initiative. They had some of the best security people in the world.
But so it's, again, not so much a Microsoft thing. And again, maybe it's my focus on supply chain, but I don't see how we can have secure, functional supply chains, particularly in certain critical sectors, in the very near future, measured in a handful of years, without the kind of clarity on policy, implemented for that. But I think, maybe I'm trying to stretch the analogy, but I think this is the same sort of thing. And Jack, to your point, this is a big corporation that actually spends a lot of money and does some good security stuff. And even they can't have enough operational policy at the product management level for someone to say, not only no, no, that's no.
But I think the question is, who were they listening to when they decided to implement this feature? Were they listening to enterprises that said, we do want this feature on all of our employees' workstations? We find that this would be a useful feature. Or maybe they weren't listening to anybody and they thought it was a really cool idea and don't have really good use cases and forgot about the spyware aspect of it. I want to give them at least some benefit of the doubt. But we don't know who asked for this, and somebody asked for that. I can't imagine Microsoft just delivering something because they thought it would be a good idea without doing any kind of customer discovery. It would be shocking. It would be shocking for me to know that they just did it without asking. So who asked for it, and what were the use cases, and why can't you turn it on and off? Is the question I'd be asking Microsoft.
Well, I think there is an ulterior motive here, is that PCs had become commodity items, right? And I think there was a lot of movement towards Apple as a different form of a PC, and to take advantage of AI and push more AI hardware and reinvigorate PC sales, which have become stagnant, right? In order to use these features, you really do need, not to do the screenshot version, but to do the analysis, you need the AI PCs and have an AI chip in your PC. So there is a motivation to sell more hardware to take advantage of these features, or, and so that's part of the motivation, is to push more hardware. And part of it is to make the PC something more than a dumb client where the web browser is your interface to everything.
Or
Right.
Chromebook, as you may.
I'm sorry? Yeah, Chromebooks, right?
Alan, we're at the point now where Microsoft is quite literally begging / forcing people into Windows 11. So does this become another reason maybe not to go to Windows 11 and use a Mac, or, to your earlier point, Chromebook? Or heaven forbid, a Linux desktop?
So I'm going to be the contrarian here. I think you guys are missing the boat. As a matter of fact, I would expect a feature like this more from Apple than I would from Microsoft. I think this is clearly aimed at the consumers. Because here's the newsflash. Old people like us, we tend to give a crap about our so-called privacy. Young people a lot of them don't even have a concept of privacy. They think everything online is online. Well, it is. By definition, if it's online, it's online. But that being said, it may be more important to them to have the utility of this recall feature than it is to have the risk of that information making its way out there. Because they don't have a concept of privacy anymore. And I don't want to go play in front of your old house, old man, but a lot of the younger generations do not have a concept of privacy. And when they do, if they do, then they are very selective about it. And if Microsoft would have put this on right in terms of when you want to turn it on, when you want to turn it off, what kind of things it recalls, what kind of things it doesn't, it may find a market in people who like, you take the security aspect out of it, yeah, that's a pretty cool, useful thing I might have, right? And if security is not important to you, privacy is not important to you. Chris?
Yeah, let me see if I can bind my point with yours, right? I stand by my point that there isn't the governance structure inside corporations to make these sort of decisions. There should be a function that if I say I want to do this, there's some internal control that says before X do Y, and Y is the decision point. It doesn't exist. But to your point, let's map those two together, because that's a very common perception of folks our age, right? And I think, this is, to be pedantic, one of my inevitability curve things. Decades ago, I was looking at this and saying, all right, in the future, there will be cameras everywhere. Nothing on earth is going to stop that. It may be sooner or later, it's happened. At some point, and after that point, forever, for all of human future, for thousands of millions, people will live in a world where cameras are everywhere. This is the last part where we go. And they will either exist in that world in a constant soup of privacy compromise, or they will have figured it out. And I think this is a perfect example of how much we haven't figured it out. And your comments about the current generation, I think, mark this difference between our generation that says we can build a wall around all of this and no one will ever find it, and a generation that grew up in it who, I wouldn't take it as far as your point, privacy is a more fungible thing. We just think that it's a save for the brick, wall. It'll never get open. This generation understands that privacy isn't forever. And they may have thrown their hands up because us folks who built this system have no governance structure for what privacy even means.
I'll disagree on 2 points. One is the Europeans damn well do care about this regardless of their age. And so I'm making broad generalizations based on age. I don't see that. I also see my kids routinely use apps like WhatsApp, even here in the US now, because they are conscious of the privacy issues. And so they have a whole separate channel for certain conversations that they want to have. And then I also would say, yeah, maybe we'll have video cameras everywhere. And we're also going to have meetings and block parties where there'll be no cameras allowed. So there you go.
You might.
Well, to Alan's point,
go ahead.
To Alan's point, there was a market. There was a market because Microsoft is.
Microsoft's too smart to just roll that out. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a market. And I think to Alan's point, I think he might be spot on that this was a market to a younger generation because of the way that they're much more voyeuristic than we would ever have been. They are used to having things on that, all of them want to be content creators. Anybody I speak to who is under the age of 19 think that that's their next job. So, I think that there's a market for it. And to Alan's point, turning it on and off would have been a good idea.
Well, that may be the answer. That Microsoft makes it easier to say, like before it recalls something. Is this something you want on recall? You want to set your recall policies, or what have you, because
I can see a total use for this for gamers. I'm sorry, I just can.
Yeah, no,
I think it's a great
I mean,
application for gamers.
it's like, as the best intentions, right? The road to perdition and all that good stuff. But, is this where we're heading? I mean, your point about cameras. I'm president of the HOA where I live. Don't ask. But I get a thing last week that we had a break-in. I said, oh my God, there's like no crime where I live. What kind of break-in? So we send out a thing. If anyone has video of last night showing someone potentially breaking in, let us know. Almost every house. So I live on a canal to the Intracoastal, and there's houses it's sort of a U shape, if you will, right, on both sides of the canal. And every house has video, it seems. Either it's Ring or whatever. These are not official like surveillance videos. Each house has their own thing. We have this guy walking in at 11:30 at night. He tries to jump on someone's boat and misses, because he misses the boat. Winds up in the canal. Pulls himself out of the canal, climbing up a ladder that is encrusted with barnacles. He must have cut himself all up. He comes off the water with one shoe and no shirt, and he's walking around. He doesn't know what to do. He sees a ladder 2 doors down. He grabs a ladder, because the door was closed. He puts the ladder up, and he's trying to climb to the 2nd floor of this villa to get in there. He climbs up the ladder. He falls down the ladder. How this guy didn't die trying to break into the house. He then gets up and he says, I better get the hell out of here. And he grabs his shirt and one shoe and he leaves the neighbor. And we have him walking through 4, 5, 6 house, backyards to get out of my neighborhood. And we gave it all to the police. The police said, we know this guy. We caught him on the Lincoln Boulevard Bridge at a half hour before this, but he wasn't doing anything illegal, so we let him go. He was just kind of walking around, crazy. So he never broke into anything, by the way. But yes, that's the world we live in. And those are good things to have, I guess.
It kind of always has been, right? If you ever lived in a small town, right, and you on a Sunday morning put on your spouse's bathrobe and walk out of the backyard and walk back inside, they know about it before you get inside, right? And that's and what I said about the past and the future. Like, look, privacy, since unless you live in a tree stump by yourself, privacy is a relative thing, and we all deal with it all the time. If you're out in public, you're out in public. People may see you, people may take pictures. It's a funny thing, but again, in 1742, it was the same. Old Broderick walked down the street yesterday. Did you see him? Oh my God, where's he going? We'll figure it out. But
you had well-armed militias back then, though.
So this issue that starts us with this again, I think is just an indication of the immaturity of our handling of this tech. Right? We can figure it out, but this is a misstep. They should have thought on through bad optics.
So clarify that point for me. Is being online essentially being out in public, or is my laptop the equivalent of my castle is my home is my laptop?
Only if you bring down the cone of silence.
It's the same with being out in public, honestly. If you're gonna send information in a email or a parchment on a carrier pigeon, it's out in public.
For a whole lot of stuff we do on our computers is not involved sending that information out to the internet, and that's not public, right? We do a whole lot of confidential work, whether it's our own personal accounting, our own personal journal, whatever you want to talk about. We use our computers for a whole lot of stuff, the same we use our phones and everything else. And it is not stuff that we ever intend to be shared or make public. And I think the challenge of getting circling all the way back to the beginning with Signal's challenge is there is no granular control of recall. And they had to do unnatural acts to make recall not take screenshots of what Signal was doing,
Right.
which was never meant to be public,
It
right?
definitely needs more granular control. But Jack, I'm reminded of what I used to tell people when they were talking about risk and how could they be more secure. Don't connect to the internet. Unplug your router, right? If you're going to have a machine that you're going to do stuff that you don't want it to find its way online, don't connect to the internet, because anytime you connect to the internet, there's going to be some risk. Whether you want to accept that risk or not, that's a risk management issue.
And this is their job, right? Like Jack, what you're saying, right? And to be really clear, online and online. My machines actually have cloud bits. It's not all about physically here. There's a difference between online and online, but there's also in the physical world, it's not that clear either. As we all, the security people, I can listen to you in your house, in your basement, with an audio microphone from not that bloody far away, and right? Security and risk are all relative, as you say. We accept or we don't. We need to address all of this the same way we do all other risk. Some of it we worry way too much. Some of it we don't worry nearly enough, and we have a lot of work to do yet.
Crazy. All right, hey, we're overtime on this one, so we're going to have to boogie for the next ones. Let's take a break here on The Gang. We're going to come back, and speaking of the cone of silence, we're going to talk about cybersecurity chaos. Is that a new organization that Maxwell Smart is fighting? I don't know. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, we're back here. Hey, I was reminded during the commercial break, we broke protocol here. We got so excited over this recall stuff. We went back, recalled it, and realized we made a mistake. Jack Poller, who I've known now for some time, I met Jack most recently via the Tech Field Day gang, Steve Foskett and Tech Field Day. Jack's a regular delegate on Tech Field Days, but Jack's also a pretty well-known fellow in the security space, analyst. But Jack, I don't want to introduce you. Introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Alan. It is a pleasure to be here. And yes, I am a Tech Field Day delegate. And actually, next week, we'll be doing Security Field Day live. So that'll be very interesting. I actually started life as an engineer developing chips and software, and then turned myself into a marketing person and did marketing for startups for a while, and then became an industry analyst focused on cybersecurity. So I speak a little bit about a lot of different things. And
that's the perfect profile for a Techstrong Gang member. So welcome to the gang, Jack. It's great to have you on. We look forward to having you on as a regular. Excuse me. That being said, chaos in cybersecurity. Imagine that.
So Splunk has this report out where they surveyed a bunch of folks, and they found that nearly half, 46% at least, claim that they are spending more time maintaining their cybersecurity tools and environments than they are actually protecting the organization. And we've talked in the past on the show about the potential rise of what you might call the cybersecurity industrial complex. But Jack, are we a little out of control on our tools here? And is something amiss? Or, is this just kind of the nature of the game?
Well, I like the reference to the cybersecurity industrial complex. There are more than 4,000 cybersecurity tool vendors with more than 10,000 products. So it is a huge endeavor. And I think what the Splunk report sort of highlights is three perpetual evergreen themes. One of which is, from a cybersecurity tools perspective, is platforms versus point tools. One of which is people and process. And the third is the critical lack of cybersecurity skills. All right. And so if we think about, so go back to that is, platforms versus point tools. And I've done my own research in this area, and practitioners always tell us that they want platforms because they want all the different domains of cybersecurity, whether you're thinking about endpoint security or network security or identity. They want it all to talk together and integrate, because there's just so many different domains that interact with each other. The problem is platforms never provide, in their opinion, the practitioner's opinion, never provide the best tools for each particular area. So they always, while they say they want platforms, they always buy point tools or best of breed tools. Right. And so when you do that, you end up with tools from different vendors that don't talk to each other or collect the same data but store it in a different way. Or so you have overlapping data sets and huge data sets, and managing this becomes a problem, particularly when you think about Splunk, who originated the study in their environment, where they're collecting so much data that simply the cost of collecting, storing, and managing that data is a problem in and of itself, where there are now other tools available to solve that problem, right? So now you have to solve the problem of how expensive it is to collect the data you need in order to figure out how to secure your environment. So it is it's something that I've seen before. It's a big problem. It's a big challenge. And then when you throw on top of that the lack of cybersecurity skills, right? And, and the research that I've done over the last 15 years perpetually says that roughly half of organizations say they don't have the skills and they can't hire for those skills. They don't have the resources to staff up for one reason or another. Then it becomes an overwhelming challenge of how do I need this tool because it's the best at securing this particular part of my environment. And I need this tool over here. It's the best at securing this part of my environment. But how do I make them work together without me spending an inordinate amount of time and doing unnatural acts? So I think a lot of people suffer from this. So I'm not surprised at all with the data from Splunk.
I've got two things on this one. Number one, something that really drives the chaos here is shiny trinket syndrome. Jack, you touched on it. You go talk to the security administrator. He says, "Oh yeah, no, I want to standardize. I want to standardize on a platform. I'm all in on Palo. I'm all in on Cisco. I'm all in on whoever de jour platform is, right?" And then they're like little kids in the candy store. They walk the aisles of RSA and all those blinking lights and puppies and goats that were there this year and everything else. And they see the shiny new trinket, the magic bullet that's going to kill those vampires. And they just got to have it. They just got to have the shit. But it doesn't work with your platform. It's okay because I got to have the shiny new trinket. And we have suffered from shiny trinket syndrome in security for as long as I'm in security, and I'm in security 25 plus years. And how many of those shiny trinkets, like gifts that I buy for my wife that she's ashamed to tell me she doesn't like, wind up staying in the jewelry box in the top drawer of her dresser, right? So do a lot of these shiny trinkets. And until we break that syndrome, I don't know if we'll ever solve this totally. Secondly, though, I started a company called Still Secure in 2001, co-founded a company. In 2007-8, I came to the conclusion that for all but a handful of organizations, security is just too goddamn hard. They're never going to have the enough resources, manpower, skill sets, everything needed to really do security right. And that the only answer to this was MSSPs, right? You had to just let them buy the security and you come in and provide all the security they need and want and could use. Pivoted the company, bought an MSSP, and then organically started building more tools. And then the board, 2008 came, 2009, the economic downturn, and the board didn't want to give us more money to buy more MSSPs because I was out shopping. I don't think it's really changed. I think we have more tools, we have more attack surfaces, we may even have more budget. That's a good thing, I guess. We have more budget for security than we did then. But it's still too hard. It's still too hard, and there's still too many tools, and a lot of them are shelfware. And it's, I think there's some irony in that Splunk did this survey, but I'm not going to get into that one. Chris, you got your hand up?
I am going to get into that one, right? Because I happen to be, I didn't even know this was a segment here. I'm wearing a Protego shirt, my first round in the sim space, and then there was Alien Vault, which I think was around the time Splunk came out. And yeah, at that point, to Jack, to your point, that there was, hey, we already have these platforms and logging and so forth. Why do we need this extra thing? But there was, and we sold this to Cisco, who in theory plugged it into their bigger, to your point, Alan, Cisco platform. And we keep doing this. And the analogy might be, I'm trying to think of something physical, maybe a house. Like, you get a brand new house, that's perfect, it's fine, but you start adding this and adding that, and 20 years later, it's a bit of a mess. Put all that in the context of this ever-growing cybersecurity answer we're trying to find while we are building and sailing one internet that's half finished, right? So we keep saying there's too many pieces, here's a platform, oh, thank God. And right or wrong, Alan, it's maybe it's not shiny things. Maybe we're like, oh, it doesn't have one of those. We bolt that on and bolt that on and bolt it on until somebody says, it's not a platform anymore. And is it an infinite regress forever? I don't think so, but I think it, again, marks that, we thought we had everything in the platform and realized there's a bunch of things where we're doing it all yet. So here we are again.
And it's a matter of focus. We have a focus issue. We really do.
Or a lack of focus issue.
It's a lack of focus, yeah. If you look at, and you're right, Alan, the attack service for cyber is massive. So there may be a reason to have different tools for different applications of cyber. But if you just look at open source packages, which is, sort of what I specialize in, there has been billions of dollars invested in this space, literally billions of dollars. And it still takes us over 90 days to fix a single vulnerability. And we have, 10,000 were reported in the first quarter of this year. And it takes us 90 days to fix one with all the billions spent. So again, we started with observability, event management systems. It says, if you find an issue, these are the steps you have to go through. And these tools can be create a lot of toil in the process, but they're not focused on fixing the problem. And it's the same with any of the networking tools. A lot of it has to do with observability. And I am hoping that we will see in the future AI applied to helping us get through this problem. Because we can't throw up our hands and say we have to stop doing this because it's too hard. We can't do that. We don't have an option.
So is AI the new silver bullet?
I don't know, but I can tell you right now that I've been working with the CI/CD cybersecurity working group at the CDF, and our goal was to take the secure software development framework, take every task and map it to a tool. And I have a team of hotshot DevOps engineers and some security folks on that, and we are struggling to do it. So the software development framework is actually too complicated. It's too it doesn't have it tries to have focus, but it's really hard to think through how you would actually implement it. So the result is you don't do it. So yes, we need to do work in this area, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm hoping AI can help. I really do believe that in terms of some work that can be done, being able to do predictive analysis, being able to troubleshoot things before they happen, being able to update configurations on a network before that they're a problem, or fix things in a POM file because you have the wrong pinned version and it's done automatically for you is the way out.
So Tracy, you're highlighting a lot of what, one of the themes that I said this highlights is that it's a people process problem, right? And it's a people process problem in developing the tools. As Alan said, it's the people process problem in chasing the shiny toy, the new bauble, rather than focusing on cybersecurity hygiene. Look, we know from things like the Verizon Data Breach Investigative Report that the vast majority of cybersecurity data breaches originate in an identity-related attack. And if organizations would simply make MFA mandatory, we would probably cut that in half overnight. I mean, I've talked to I talked to a CISO of a financial institution with had 30 million customers, and when they made MFA mandatory for their 30 million customers, they saw the number of attacks, not successful attacks, just the number of attacks they faced on a daily basis drop 95% in a week. Right? It's simple things like this that isn't a shiny toy. It's well known, it works, and it will stop most of the breaches that most companies attack. The most companies face. The reality is most companies aren't getting attacked by nation state actors, and most companies aren't getting attacked but with 0-day obscure things that they haven't discovered yet. Most of it is we've somehow, somewhere, somehow got somebody's account, and we're logging in and going from there. And if we could simply focus on these low-hanging fruit, we'd be just so much better off than implementing yet another tool in our tool chain.
There are people starting to ask the question about whether cybersecurity people are cray-cray, right? The amount of investment that we keep putting into this space keeps going up. Keep buying tools, and then you tell us that you don't have enough people. Well, then where are you getting the people to master all the tools you want to buy? So there's a lot of folks who are standing around going, do these cybersecurity people really understand the ROI of the situation? And why are we giving them
There
more
is
money?
no ROI. I mean, look, and you're talking to someone who you made an ROI calculator when I used to sell security, right? It's very hard to prove ROI because how do you prove when nothing happened? But to Jack's point, recently identity has been recognized as the leading cause of breaches. In previous versions of the Verizon data breach report, they used to give you a statistic like 80 to 85% of all breaches took place from known vulnerabilities. If we would just patch our vulnerabilities, we wouldn't have 80 to 85% of these things. Now it's 80 to 85% of these take place because we've given up identity. If we would just put in multi-factor authentication, we would do these things. I don't know.
Did Jack and Tracy both made points that sort of speak to that? Jack, the way I read your point, I agree, is that most of the time, if you can mow the lawn and get rid of most of the problem, then you just focus on the rest. To your point, Alan, is the rest going to expand again to take over the lawn? Yeah, I mean, candy lines. However, right, it's this focus part of it that you were talking about, Tracy, right? Because as the average consumer, where do you start? You read an article, you do that thing. Does it solve the problem? No. So our focus is messed up. We're not, quite often not addressing the easy things that would at least let us focus back on the big things.
Let's look at MFA for a second, right? So we're on a big push here with Futurum and Techstrong. We've gone to MFA mandatory. Get a lot of pushback from people. Why? Anybody, same thing like developers and DevOps, anybody raise their hand and say, I want to develop insecure code? No, we all want secure code. Anybody say, I don't want to do MFA because I like to be insecure and live on the edge? No one raises their hand for that. Why can't we get people to adopt more MFA then? The fact we need to make it mandatory? Why wouldn't everyone say, I want to be more secure? I want to make sure my company's not the next headline. What is it about MFA that's such a giant PIA that we can't get people to do this?
Because it is a PIA.
There you go.
Because
Okay,
it
but wait,
is a
but
PIA.
it introduces friction, and that's an implementation issue, and the market should be beating up the vendors for that. How many of you guys use Face ID on your Android or your Apple phones, right? That's MFA. That's the very secure way of logging
that's what I've gone to. They call them pass keys and everything else. It's all fine.
Passkeys, which is passwordless, is a much more secure way of doing it.
No doubt. I'd love to see the whole world go there.
And so would I. And it takes time, right? And I'd be happy if most organizations said, we don't have MFA, let's skip over MFA completely and go to passkeys. But that's not a realistic journey for most organizations. But my point
But the technology's there, Jack, to do it. We all have phones that have recognition. We all can get keyboards with the fingerprint. We all can get fobs if we wanted. I'm telling you that, to me, it screams that people are not seeing this as a priority. They don't see security as a good enough priority to just do something simple like that. And if more vendors built it in and made it mandatory, don't rely on the organization, go to the vendor with it, we'd be better off. And I'm convinced it's not going to happen during my work lifetime.
Well, so now here's the interesting thing is Microsoft just flipped the switch and is now making passwordless mandatory for its consumer accounts.
And that is under total recall too.
So my issue with MFA is not that I'm against it on any level, but I swear, every time I go implement it, it takes 3 times to implement it. Then somebody goes and upgrades something, and I got to go back in and re-implement everything that we previously implemented. So, it is not a one and done kind of thing. It's like I constantly have to do that. Now, how many apps do I have and how many platforms? I could be doing MFA every day of the week if I wanted to.
Oh, several times. Many times during the day. It's not just once a week. It's many times.
Yeah, no, it's every time you log
that.
in. I know.
I have to have my phone by my desk just to use my software.
That's exactly what it is. You need your phone in your hand. But let me just tell you something I learned in security early on too. You got to have a little bit of a breach to get religion. So Mike, when we see naked pictures of you up on the internet, you'll go to MFA.
That's going to be, I will tell you, that's going to be an awesome story for Security Boulevard.
Absolutely. Let's take a break here. Mike's going to go put on some clothes or whatever. We're going to come back and we're going to shift a little bit to DevOps. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back and we're going to talk about DevOps. And of course, there'll probably be a little dovetail into DevSecOps because it's that kind of theme this week. But we're talking about a new effort by CloudBees, which kind of helped pioneer this whole space with the development of Jenkins to unify DevOps. And what they're saying is that they'll provide a control plane that will talk to multiple DevOps platforms, not just Jenkins, but GitHub Actions and GitLab and whatever else you can imagine. Tracy, you've been around this space for a long time. The land of DevOps is the land of bespoke tools. Is that going to change? And can we just have an overlay?
Well, we've been the CD Foundation has been working on CD events for a very long time and trying to create a standard control plane that would define actions within the pipeline that could be managed as an event. So, CloudBees, I'm glad CloudBees is talking about Jenkins again. Thank you. But I don't know if we're going the right direction for solving this problem. So if we think about where we've been, and I've been in configuration management my entire career, there was a point in time that there was an argument that you should only have one SCM tool, and everybody should stay on that standard SCM tool. And every tool out there fought for it. CA with Harvest fought very hard for that position. There were other tools who were fighting for that position, but it never worked. So now we're giving up on that conversation. And now we're thinking about doing the same, but with a control plane on top of it, so that we can try to unify and standardize this fragmented information that comes from multiple locations. DeployHub's doing it too. We're doing it with configuration data around deployments. But to be quite honest, I think that it's time that we disrupt DevOps tools completely. I'm ready for a hand grenade to be thrown in the middle of it all. We need a massive disruption in the way that we do manage workflows and do DevOps, because it is it's very inflexible. I have complained many times on this show about how brittle all the DevOps workflows are. Why are teams not able to add easily things like an SBOM or collection of evidence so that they have a historical record of what occurred? Why is it so hard? Well, it's so hard because we keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and that is scripts. So I don't know if adding a control plane for unifying the DevOps information goes far enough. And in their announcement, they did talk about standardizing on some other tooling that probably will make it hard for them to implement or to get adoption across a broad audience. Because every team wants to use their own tools. And this kind of goes back to our previous discussion around security. We are creatures of habit. We have a culture around security that says we hate having to use multi-factor authentication. And in DevOps, we like to have our custom scripts built. And until we can step aside and figure out a better way to manage this, we're always going to be having this conversation about unifying the configuration management data into one place. My point is, though, not to necessarily manage the workflows in one place or even to watch the workflows, but is to gather the data about the workflows. Because if we're going to ever build an SML that's DevOps data, we're going to have to start collecting it. And we don't do that. As a community, if you talk to CloudBees, they run, I don't know, 50 million workflows in their CloudBees SaaS environment. How much of that data do they collect? And that is where I believe the answer is going to be in terms of better DevOps processing in the future.
I have a few thoughts. First of all, Cloud who? I'll be very honest with you. I thought CloudBees was either in some quiet period that they were getting acquired or that everyone left and the last person shut the lights out. I haven't heard anything come out of CloudBees in months and months and months, if not a year or more now, right? To be clear, they were sort of the Jenkins company, but they didn't invent Jenkins. Jenkins was a fork of Hudson by KK Kasuagi before he joined CloudBees. They brought him into CloudBees as chief tech CTO and then chief science officer. And then KK and Harpreet left to start Launchable. And then they brought Launchable, which I'm not quite sure what they're doing with Launchable. That was all about testing. But I think they wanted to have KK back because once he left, kind of the whole momentum behind CloudBees seemed to have gone with them. They've had a bunch of fits and starts over the last couple of years, right? They tried, first they were the Jenkins company, then they weren't the Jenkins company, then they were sometimes the Jenkins company, then they were the partial Jenkins company, then they gave Jenkins to the CDF and they were big behind it, then they weren't so big behind it. It's been a muddled path for them. And now what do? They say, wait a second, there's a lot of people using GitLab. There's a lot of people using GitHub. Wouldn't it be great if we could suck in that information and just give them one pane of glass or one plane where we can manage these other open source based tools? That'll get us back in with the good DevOps guys. I don't know if this is what the industry wants. I don't know if this is what the industry needs. I don't see a lot of, streamlining CI/CD management. Tracy, to your point, hey, I say better off, go look up something called Native AI Dev. Patrick Dubois, who started DevOps, is behind it. Guy Po from Sneak, DevSecOps behind it. There's a lot of people coming behind it. They are looking at a better way of doing development and deployment, utilizing AI, and maybe missing some of the sins. And I'm not blaming anyone. DevOps was very organic. It grew very organically, almost by design. And as the founder at DevOps.com, I'm still a big fan, and I think it's done wonders for our industry and how we build and deploy software. I think the platform engineering people have some ideas, right, that helps. They don't replace the DevOps engineer, but it's like a precursor to the developer and DevOps engineer. Here's the real bottom line, though. Fundamentally, I had this conversation with Mitch Ashley the other day. Fundamentally, We make software in a factory. Software has outgrown being a craftsman, gilded, kind of small cottage kind of way of building stuff to factory level, where you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved in developing and deploying your software. And in a factory, you have specialists, you have robots, you have, all different kinds of people working in that factory. DevOps is one kind of worker there. The security guy will be a worker there. The platform engineer will be a worker there. The tester's a worker there. Certainly the developer is a worker there. They all work at the factory. Mike's saying, maybe not.
No, don't. I don't look. Most developers that I know are not excited about going to work in Detroit in factory. It's just not.
Not every factory's in Detroit,
right? But that's the idea. So they are in their minds problem solvers and artisans, not just craftsmen. So presenting them with that metaphor has always been problematic, and they have resisted it immensely for years now. And I don't see them changing that.
Well, they'll be replaced by AI. I'm kidding.
I do see an opportunity for this platform and platform engineering to kind of converge. I think there's a certain amount of a desire for something that feels more like an easy button. So if you show up with a SaaS platform, there's some folks who are going to say, yeah, that's good enough for now. But there is, to Tracy's point, much work to be done, and there are people talking about how AI agents will eliminate scripts altogether. So it could be a journey.
Could be. Chris.
You folks know more about the current state of DevOps than I do, but something you said, Tracy, sparked this. You mentioned SBOMs, right? And in the SBOM world, in the working groups where we're all working, putting this stuff together, week to week and month to month over the last couple of years, when some of us, people like me, will say, we're not just talking about an SBOM attached to some product. We're talking about through the development lifecycle, all sorts of telemetry about what's going on being produced and retained. And I think the reason that makes people's head reboot is because how much data is that? But again, this is where we're going. Not to try or to try to combine too many issues, Alan. This is that sort of everlasting security issue. If it's just a cost and something complicated I need to add to things, it doesn't add a business value, then yes, security is a problem. But I see in the development lifecycle actual benefits of having the kind of telemetry that Tracy you were talking about, where you really do have that continuity of visibility into workflows, so that because it is a factory world. How do we actually do this if it's not all done by hand, and we don't do it with the amount of telemetry and visibility into how we into the code we're building?
All right. So Microsoft's going to come out with GitHub recall, and then we'll have it solved.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. We need recall in DevOps. I mean, Jenkins doesn't even you don't really have a history in Jenkins. It doesn't even have the concept of historical records, right?
The
So
challenge
it
is,
don't have
Alan,
any recall at all.
the challenge is that corporations have an idealized picture of the software factory, and a large corporation like a Home Depot or a Target may have 100 or 200 engineers working in a software factory. The reality is that most open source tools originated from some guy saying, I have a very specific problem I'm going to solve. I've created that. I built a tool to solve it. I'm going to throw it out in the wild, right? It's sort of a variation of, you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it was yours, right? And it's, if you love your software, set it free. If it comes back improved, great. And that's how, open source.
So that's basic open source. But Jack, when you look at the open source of DevOps, when you look at things like GitHub and GitLab and Jenkins,
how did those tools arise? Those tools arose not because somebody did a market test, not because somebody created a minimum viable product, figured out what's actually needed in the world and did it. They grew organically with somebody adding this and somebody adding
so
that.
I'm gonna call BS. I'm gonna call BS on you. GitLab was started because Sid Brajani looked at GitHub and said, I could build a better GitHub. This is something people want. Jenkins was forked because they said Hudson, we don't like the rules around Hudson and who has it, and we can make an industrial strength Hudson, right? For most open source, Jack, you're right. But for DevOps tools, these were tools that were supposed to encompass your
But if they
developer
did-
team.
Right, except for if they had done that, they would have thought about a lot of these issues
They did.
that we're
They,
talking
they
about. No, because
absolutely did. In the case
this
of
is why
GitLab, they did.
No. This is why 25 years after we created Makefiles, which are tab delimited files that are stupid, we created YAML with the same stupid thing of requiring tabs and spaces to set structure. If we had thought about it and said, rather than saying, I'm going to create something that solves my problem and grow it organically, if we thought about it and said, how do you create a config file that actually works, that doesn't have syntax, all of that, we know we had 25 years of history with Makefiles before we ever got to YAML. Right? We should never have gotten to where we are today. If we had done an MVP for YAML, somebody would have said, this is ridiculous that I actually have to figure out how many indents I need in order to.
But I know people who love YAML.
Okay, let me chime in here. Part of the problem has been open source, because it's free, can be easily downloaded, and a DevOps engineer or a developer can get started with it without doing what? Without doing a single product evaluation. Now, if it's a paid for product, they're going to say, we need to find 2 or 3 products. We need to sit down and write what our
and bake 'em
criteria
off.
should be,
Right.
and bake them off. And I used to get so frustrated in my Open MakeMeister days when, go back to Make, we were generating what we called build control files that got rid of a lot of the problems with a standard Make. And standardizing how libraries were being pulled in. And we struggled because we would try to go out and do a bake-off with nobody else. And the developers would already had written these massive Make scripts. And the companies would say, well, they already fixed it. But they really hadn't. They just have something running, right? But there was never in open source, and Jenkins benefited from this. You never had to go through a proper product evaluation. And so what happened? We stopped listening to our end users because they would just download whatever they could get their hands on. And if it was failing in certain areas, they overlooked it because it was
that
free.
was the tool, right? Jenkins was the tool.
That was the tool. It had the most attention.
I got to pull the plug. I'm going to take the prerogative here as host to give you my last word. A lot of the open source DevOps tools, Jack, didn't follow that Cathedral and Bazaar do open source because it's cool. They did open source as a business model. And there's a difference. When you do open source as a business model, you're just thinking, how could I use open source to get greater distribution of my product that I fully intend to make a lot of money from? Anyway, we're going to break. We're coming back tomorrow with more Techstrong Gang. Jack, it's been a great first time on here. Can't wait to have you back on. Chris, good seeing you. Mike, Tracy, we will have you on again real soon, maybe tomorrow. Stay tuned for Techstrong TV. I think we have, Tech Field Day's next week. We won't have a Tech Field Day immediately following, but Techstrong TV's on. Check it out. I'm Alan Schimmel. We're out.